Have you noticed there's a lot more of us autistic folks these days? If autism is becoming more prevalent, it's important to note how it is depicted and perceived within movies. And that representation from the perspective of an autistic film critic, such as myself, has been, to put it mildly, bad. And it was already pretty bad to begin with. I mean, I read this 2005 book on mental conditions and movies, and the section on autism is only 4 pages long. And even with the few examples that it covers, it doesn't really explore many of the issues regarding autism representation in media. So that was kind of a waste of a read. There haven't been many apt autism depictions in recent movies either. In 2019, we got The Fanatic, in which a stalker/killer has autism, which motivates his dangerous tendencies. In 2020, we got The Night Clerk, in which the central autistic character has to violate people's privacy because he has autism and needs to study conversations. And then in 2021, we got Music, which was loaded with misinformation on autism and just generally sucks. There's a handful of good autism representation in films like 2017's Power Rangers and the 2020 horror film Come Play, but that's still pretty sparse. The most recent disgraces of autism representation was with The Good Doctor, framing an embarrassing stereotype that becomes more of itself as the show went on.
I am a surgeon! I am a surgeon! I am a surgeon!
I hate this! It is revolting!
And then there was the unbearable movie The Unbreakable Boy, a throwback to those autism kid melodramas that I thought we were done with, but apparently not. And so, if we can't find accurate portrayals of autism in media, we go looking for it elsewhere within media that is not specifically labeled with autistic characters. In the same way that the queer community finds queer-coded representation in media with straight characters, autism coding within media can be used to do the same for perceived neurotypical characters. And there are plenty of characters in film and television who carry this autism coding. It should be noted before going forward that autism coding does not mean explicitly diagnosing a character with autism. Queer film theory, for example, is not used to determine which characters are gay, but which characters carry relatable queer traits. By that same token, autism coding is used to identify characters with autistic traits who are either written explicitly as neurotypical or not confirmed to have an autism diagnosis. So let's dig into a few examples of autism coding that we can find in movies. While most superheroes adopt a different identity to fight crime, Superman kind of does the opposite. The man in the cape is the real Superman, while the reporter in a suit who goes by the name Clark Kent is the disguise. This has been pointed out numerous times in pop culture, and you might remember it as part of the monologue for Kill Bill Volume 2. This aspect of secret identities is worth noting as it makes Superman one of the most compelling superheroes for autism coding. Superman was initially known on his home planet of Krypton as Kal-El. He immigrated to Earth when his parents launched him into space as a baby amid the planet's explosion. Kal-El is far different from the humans of Earth in that the radiation of our sun grants him many talents like flight, speed, strength, endurance, super hearing, heat vision, X-ray vision, and ice breath. And yet he looks human and can blend in easily if he merely hides his powers. Though Superman grows up with the rural couple of Jonathan and Martha Kent in Smallville, both his adoptive and biological parents echo the same sentiment of masking. Autistic masking is a method of either consciously or unconsciously appearing more passable as neurotypical, camouflaging traits that would be considered autistic. It's an act often mimicked through the observation of neurotypical individuals, either through social interactions or various media. Before and during his journey to Earth, Kal-El is given insight and instruction by his biological father, Jor-El, on how to handle his new life on Earth. This aspect is reiterated further when Kal-El establishes the Fortress of Solitude on Earth with a working hologram duplication of his father. Among the stipulations of his late father, Jor-El stresses that Superman should not interfere too much in the overall events that affect humans on Earth. When Kal-El first lands on Earth, the Kents quickly discover discover his talents when the small boy lifts their car. As a teenager, he learns to use his powers more in secret as the unassuming boy Clark Kent. He only races across town at incredible speed when few would notice or believe their eyes. This would imply that he has grown up learning to conceal his abilities in lessons, likely stressed by the Kents more than anyone else. These early teachings of masking are hammered home more overtly in the remake of Man of Steel, where a more concerned Jonathan stresses how important it is to a young Clark Kent that he must choose to conceal his abilities rather than outwardly display them, even at the cost of lives. However, that stumbling lesson is a bit more subtle in Superman the movie, as Clark learns more through his father's fatal heart attack that he can't save everybody. Or at least, that's what he's taught. Man of Steel also highlights autistic sensory overload when a young Clark is unable to control his super hearing. But it's not explored long enough to be more thoroughly read for its autistic coding. There's also a lot of weird eugenics stuff and thematic dissonance within Man of Steel that makes it a bit of a mess, so let's just stick with 1978's Superman. When the alien immigrant reaches adulthood, he ventures to Metropolis and he is ready to mask up fully. He completely transforms into Clark Kent, a fresh journalist at the Daily Planet, stumbling and stammering through work as an accidental and nervous man in a restricting suit and thick glasses. The nervousness may be genuine, however, as he conceals his powers, which sometimes slip out. He tries not to stir up trouble, but when his boss, Perry White, notices he's a lightning-fast typist, he is promoted to the city beat. This quick progression aggravates his co-worker and future love interest, Lois Lane. When Clark and Lois walk the streets of Metropolis, they are cornered in an alley by a mugger. And while Lois is in no mood to concede to this gun-toting mugger's demands, Clark grows a little bit nervous. Whether the nervousness is for the well-being of Lois, the concern of his true identity being revealed, or just being an act is debatable. Ultimately, Clark gets in the way of the bullet, and the mugger shoots and exits. Lois is shocked by this, and Clark plays it off that the bullet must have missed him. Now, all of this might seem like an act. I mean, once Lois exits the alley, Clark grins as he reveals to the audience that he caught the bullet. But just before this moment, Clark lets another one of his powers slip out. He states that Lois's life isn't worth what's in her purse, which he describes in perfect detail. Lois asks how he knew the contents of her bag without looking inside, and Clark just laughs it off as being a lucky guess. But why would Clark let that slip? It's a crack in the mask, a yearning for Clark to do more with his abilities, yet conceal them to blend in with everyone else. Superman's journey to becoming Clark Kent is not as pronounced in the movie because it's perhaps not as compelling as embracing the more adventurous aspects. Not to mention the film already runs well over 2 hours. Yet there's certainly an aspect of one coming to terms with one's autism in that gap. Some with autism don't discover their diagnosis until much later in life, though they proceed knowing they're different from others in ways that they can't quite articulate. It's only once he creates the Fortress of Solitude and speaks with the hologram of his father Jor-El does he learn the truth. Once Clark understands fully why he is the way he is, he instantly becomes Superman. The primary colored outfit with his family crest embraces him, and he soars into the sky with the most convincing of special effects for the 1970s. He is now aware that he is Superman, and more importantly, why he is that way. But he also realizes that he can't be Superman if he hopes to lead the human life that he's come to know. He believes that Superman could not be a reporter. Someone like Clark Kent, however, can fill that role. Thus, Clark Kent becomes the mask, and understandably so. When he's Clark, he's treated the same way as everyone else, to some degree. When he's Superman, however, the public is astounded to see a colorfully dressed man flying through the skies of Metropolis. As Superman, Kal-El feels more at ease and comfortable. His face is warm, his demeanor is calm, and he's willing to help in any way he can, be it saving a plane full of people or a cat from a tree. He is exceptionally comfortable when he meets with Lois on a balcony for his first interview with a popular publication. And watch how comfortable Superman appears, speaking honestly with a breath of gentleness. He's not afraid to make his powers known, even letting his knowledge out more freely. Remember when he tried to cover up his X-ray vision after viewing the contents of Lois's purse? Well, now, Superman openly admits to that power and even showcases how accurate he can be in describing what color of undergarments that Lois is wearing, after she asks, of course. He even states it at the seemingly wrong time, as he can't properly see what Lois is wearing when she's behind a lead barrier, only remarking that she's wearing pink panties once she immediately steps away from the lead. It's a power that he just can't help but use and discuss when he feels that he can. Lex Luthor, the villain amusingly played by the late Gene Hackman, has grand plans of literally shaking the earth for his real estate scheme. However, his more personal vendetta with Superman has to do with being jealous of his abilities. As Superman might be the only one to stop Lex's evil plans, Luthor tries to discover Superman's weaknesses, pulling back the secrets of the man who has finally opened himself up a little bit more. Luthor realizes that Superman has super hearing and taps into a secret communication channel via a frequency that only Superman could hear. Luthor discovers Superman is weak against kryptonite and crafts a chained necklace of the material to hinder the superhero. With the kryptonite weakening Superman, he no longer has his powers of flight and strength. He is helpless, falling into a pool of water where he would most likely drown, while 2 missiles zoom towards different parts of the country per Luthor's real estate plans. Superman is only saved when Luthor's reluctant girlfriend cohort, Eve Tessmacher, agrees to remove the kryptonite if Superman promises to stop the missile headed for where her mother is located on the East Coast. Superman doesn't immediately agree because the other missile will be heading to the West Coast, where Lois Lane will be. Ultimately, Superman agrees to Eve's request and makes good on his word, attending to the missile targeting New Jersey first. This act by Superman is mainly viewed as part of his moral beliefs, but I think it additionally dispels the misconception of apathy in autism. A component of autism, being a communicative disorder, has often led to the belief that because of the inability to articulate every conversation, those with autism must lack empathy. It'd be easy to see this in Superman as well. He has so much power and doesn't really have to answer to anyone higher than him in terms of his abilities on Earth. This is certainly the view that Luthor takes with his debasing of the superhero. The interesting thing about this scene of Superman at his weakest is how Eve cautiously requests that he save her mother. She's trying to probe if somebody like Superman wouldn't lie, as Lex has fed her the lie of Superman's cruelty towards humanity. And as Superman proves, he considers Eve's feelings, recognizing the humanity in her plea and keeping true to his values. He does have empathy, despite what Luthor may have told Eve. Superman's most controversial choice in the picture is to commit the ultimate defiance of his father and the ethical code that he has adopted. He is too late to save Lois from the destruction of the missile, and she is suffocated by the rubble. Saddened and angered by this, Superman ascends into space with a bitter roar and hears the echoing pleas of his father to once more not interfere with the planet. Denying this request to conceal himself, Superman zooms around the Earth at incredible speeds to turn back time. In doing so, he has enough time to stop both the missiles and save Lois Lane from death. Scientifically, the climax doesn't make sense, and well, that's Superman. But more importantly, however, this scene showcases how Superman is willing to defy his concealment and be more of himself in a world that may not accept him. His turning back of time may cause problems that he cannot foresee, but he will be able to save more lives in doing so. Superman's actions will have consequences, but those are consequences he will face as he strives to become more comfortable with himself. I'll touch on Superman 2 as well, but it doesn't bode as well for autism coding. Superman 2 features the hero battling the escaped Kryptonian prisoner Zod. Unlike Superman, Zod does not hide his newfound abilities from the people of Earth. Desiring control, he uses this to his advantage, causing death and destruction to make Earth his new home. The people of Earth do not look upon Zod as they do Superman. While Superman's abilities were praised for his acts of heroism, Zod's similar skills evoke fear and terror. Prior to Zod's attack, however, Superman finds himself exposing his true identity to Lois. Kal-El, wanting to live a life with Lois and not as Superman, commits himself to removing his powers to become more man than Kryptonian. Viewing Superman's hero form as his true self, this favoring of losing powers is akin to placing on a permanent mask or curing his condition. And autism has a troubling history of some advocates seeking to cure the condition. Of course, Kal-El realizes just how dangerous and draining this can be. He experiences powerlessness when being beaten up by a trucker, causing Kal-El to feel a pain that he would have easily been able to absorb if he were still a powerful Kryptonian. Naturally, once Zod poses a major threat, Kal-El will reverse the process and go back to being Superman, realizing the importance of being himself. The troubling aspect of the film is the ultimate resolution. Lois finds herself frustrated about knowing Clark's secret, and isn't sure if she can confess her true feelings for such a man who is bound between worlds. Rather than learning to live with this aspect of their lives, Kal-El prefers to wipe Lois's mind of his identity. So while Superman ultimately ends up being true to himself and realizing he can't always mask up, he also reverts his nature to the status quo, continuing to live a secret life of both Clark Kent and Superman. There's a bittersweet nature to this conclusion, considering there's a conflict of the selfish and the selfless. It's seen as selfish for not being open with your identity, yet selfless for protecting others from learning the truth. There's a relation to how Superman's masking seems almost expected and somewhat automatic. People within this movie and world, and the audience itself, have a vision of Superman that they want to remain firm. An old and tired argument about Superman always seems to be that he's the most boring character, and this usually relates to viewing him from one angle. If he can't be harmed by bullets and has incredible strength, how could he be interesting? The argument rarely seems to come up with other superheroes who have similar powers, but it's perhaps because Superman has the most mainstream popularity. The real draw of Superman, personally, is not just that he can soar to fantastic heights or pulverize bad guys with a single punch. The more fascinating story is that Superman has to maintain a sense of strength while concealing his many vulnerabilities that go far beyond kryptonite poisoning. That's why Superman's story is interesting, as that of an outsider struggling to fit into a world that he doesn't fully understand, despite having grown up on Earth. I find him to be one of the best superheroes in general, and a great example of trying to convey the experience of autistic masking and the pressures that come with it. In the film Being There, Peter Sellers' character of Chance is a gardener at a manor who obsesses over television. He has no past and has remained employed by a wealthy man for many years, lacking proper identification and formal education. Chance is forced out onto the street when the manor's owner dies. Having only known about gardening and television, Chance stumbles around the outside world in mild confusion. Through a series of mishaps and miscommunications, he is recognized as a political advisor and commentator. His many words about gardening are misread as metaphors, and he falls upward in his political career. He is willing to move passively through the success if it means that he gets to watch television. Aside from trying to use a TV remote in real life, Chance does not speak much about the television that he watches. He watches everything from the Thomas Crown Affair to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. TV for Chance is treated less like an unhealthy obsession and more like a special interest commonly associated with autism's hyperfocus component. Chance constantly asks to watch television, but will not talk much about it, especially during broadcasts. Television is present as a form of reassuring comfort for him. Gardening is a topic he enjoys speaking more openly about. He becomes so engaged with the subject that he doesn't realize he deceives those who believe that he is making a political statement. Chance embodies many autistic traits in how he takes things literally and favors his hobbies of gardening for discussions and television for entertainment. We're not so much laughing at him in this scenario, but at how the rest of the world interprets him. Chance has simple goals in life. He wants to garden, and he wants to watch TV, and that's all he needs to be happy. Through his matter-of-fact words, however, he is constantly being misunderstood, and this rockets him to fame while others struggle to figure him out. Even though there's nothing much to figure out, those who favor Chance are ultimately those who appreciate his honesty and language. Ben Rand, a business mogul played by Melvin Douglas, doesn't just hire Chance because he thinks he's a political genius. He likes how Chance speaks his mind, even if it's really only about gardening. Eve, played by Shirley MacLaine, doesn't fall in love with Chance because he's a poet with words, but because of how he acts around her with his calmness and gentle nature. The favoring and acceptance of television as a hyperfocus is most apparent in the scenes between him and Eve. Eve is sexually attracted to Chance, but Chance doesn't seem to share the same level of intimacy. Rather, he replicates acts of intimacy that he witnesses on television. While watching the Thomas Crown Affair on television, Chance acts on the desires of Eve and replicates the sex on screen. When the sex scene ends, however, he will also end his maneuvers. And rather than being annoyed by this, Eve tries to accommodate Chance's obsession. Although she misreads his words like everyone else in the film, Eve still finds a level of intimacy with Chance as she pleasures herself while he continues to watch television. The scene has some comedy to it, of course, but also an aspect of appealing to Chance on his own earnest level. Being there is a comedy in the sense that we are let in on the joke here. Chance is a mystery of a man, but the audience is let into his world enough to know that he is not a political writer. Chance's skeptics try to find out who he really is, but they find nothing. He's an enigma. They can't figure him out, even though Chance doesn't desire much and poses no immediate threat. The only person who really knows who Chance is happens to be Louise, a maid who grew up right alongside him, played by Ruth Attaway. They part ways at the beginning of the film, but she later witnesses him on television when he rises in politics. Knowing full well that Chance doesn't know what he's doing in politics, she essentially remarks that only a white man could fall this far upward into success. It's a small but notable admission of lacking intersectionality that if someone like Chance were black, he'd likely not have gotten this far. Now, despite how little of Chance's past is revealed, we still feel like we understand this character. We take joy in knowing more about Chance than the rest of the world, which views him as a political genius instead of just stumbling into a career that he doesn't really care much about. We keep thinking that we're in on the joke, but then there's the ending. We've spent the entire movie thinking we understand Chance better than the mainstream public, and then we get to the final shot and this happens. Nothing has prepared us for this scene. There's been no suggestion that Chance can walk on water, nor is there any logical explanation for what he's doing on the screen. We think we fully understand Chance, and then we don't. We leave the picture still unsure about him, realizing there's more to him than we first thought. It reflects the same way that we thought we knew everything about autism, and then research revealed more. It's a gentle reminder that autism is more than what we initially perceive, and that the only way to understand it better is to listen more to the autistic community. We can improve autism care and knowledge if we listen to autistic people and not just for the words that we think we want to hear. Among the crew of the Starship Enterprise D in Star Trek Generations is the android Data, played by Brent Spiner. Over the course of 7 seasons on the TV series Star Trek The Next Generation, Data has proven to be more than just the deadpan delivery boy of exposition. He went through massive changes as he attempted to understand other life forms, though mostly humans. Data was an android who wanted to be human, and the aid of a special microchip would allow him to experience emotions the same way that humans do. He used this chip in the TV series before removing it to revert back. In Star Trek Generations, he considers placing the microchip back in his head for good, ready to accept and endure human emotions. His personal journey harkens to how tough life can be to navigate for the autistic, trying to come to terms with certain feelings and better understand them. What Data is essentially dealing with is a psychological trait known as alexithymia. It essentially refers to an emotional blindness where individuals are unable to recognize and describe their emotions, often causing difficulties in relationships. Although this trait is not exclusive to autism, there is a higher likelihood of this trait in those with autism. There are parts of the emotion chip that Data enjoys, such as laughing about jokes he previously did not understand. Other parts bring about great horror, such as the fear of being hurt in intense situations. The only difference between the TV series and the movie is that now Data cannot remove the chip after it fuses into his neural net. Data must now learn to work with these feelings, which he may not feel that he can control. His reaction to such emotions is reminiscent of how those with autism experience such sensations. While on the job, Data seems like his cold and calculated self, but when he is hit with emotions, they are exceptionally powerful. In one of the first scenes of trying to figure out his newfound feelings, he tastes a drink at the bar and is delighted to know that he hates a particular beverage. He smiles in delight, relishes in his preference, and orders a refill, just, comically remarking, "Oh, I hate this. I'm so glad I hate this."
I hate this. It is revolting.
More?
Please.
Later on, Data's inability to handle these emotions will hinder his job as a science officer. While he's accompanying an away team, he has interactions that baffle his coworkers. Data recalls a joke he remembered from years ago and cannot stop laughing, unable to read the room that their mission is of stern importance. Then a shootout happens on the mission, and Data finds himself stricken with incredible anxiety, unable to fight back. In a later scene, when Data works with Captain Picard over star charts, he finds it hard to concentrate on tracking the trajectory of the Nexus. He tries to tell Picard he feels overwhelmed with fear and that it is hard to focus on his work. Data relays to Picard that he cannot control his emotions and makes a harsh demand.
I no longer want these emotions. Deactivating me is the only viable solution.
What Data aggressively advocates for here is akin to eugenics, reasoning that if he is overwhelmed by emotions, then he is no good to the Enterprise. He wants the emotions removed, but the emotions are not just those of the chip. They are Data's emotions, and they make up his being now. To remove these reactions and thoughts is to remove how Data is as a person. Of course, Picard talks him down, reasoning that emotions are something that humans just have to live with. Where the autism coding doesn't bode as well is specifically how Picard talks Data down from being deactivated. It would have been an opportune moment for Picard to make Data realize that his feelings are valid and can be better controlled if properly expressed. Instead, Picard merely tells Data to do his duty and summon the emotion of courage. While this pep talk does place Data back on track for the scene's expositional purpose of revealing the evil plans of Sauron, it merely forces Data back into his unemotional state. In one sense, this may just be Picard forcing Data back into his comfort zone of remaining focused on his science officer duties, but in another way, Picard merely advocates for Data to mask his feelings. It's a conflicting scene that I honestly kind of go back and forth on. Data's hypersensitivity does have its more pleasing moments for the character. While scanning for life forms on the bridge, he is so delighted by this duty that he makes up a little song while performing his task. He'll later pump his fist when the Enterprise bests another ship in combat, and will also show more excitement amid fear as the Enterprise prepares for a crash landing, causing him to exclaim, "Oh shit." After the Enterprise crashes, Data helps in the rescue and salvage operation of the ship's crew and belongings. When finding his pet cat Spot among the rubble of the Enterprise, Data is overwhelmed with tears of relief to see his furry friend alive. It's a pleasing final scene for the character to understand that emotions are hard to bear and balance, especially for someone experiencing them so intensely. But the best moments of those emotions are like finding your lost kitty and giving him such an affectionate pet. I mean, there's nothing quite like it. The follow-up film, First Contact, further explores Data's newfound handling of extreme emotions. There are aspects of fear when encountering the Borg, and anxiousness when turned on by the Borg Queen. This happens out of an order from Captain Picard, and later out of deception for the Borg Queen. The Borg Queen tempts Data to shirk his humanity for being an outsider as an emotional android, but he can also use his outsider nature against those who would weaponize it. It's also just cool to watch Data get in a one-liner right before he kills the Borg Queen. It should be noted that there are plenty of other Star Trek characters with autism coding, so Let's just look at the other obvious example. Spock is one of the most notable autism-coded characters in Star Trek. He is the half-human, half-Vulcan science officer of the Starship Enterprise. The fourth Star Trek film, The Voyage Home, picks up after Spock was revived from the dead after the weird events of his rebirth from the previous picture. In one of the first scenes with Spock, he is given a test where questions are asked of him by a computer. He answers every question with quick ease, and then one stumps him. The question is, "How do you feel?" Spock does not answer. The question repeats, and there is still no answer, as Spock struggles to communicate his feelings in a language that would be favorable to a computer. Spock does have emotions, but can sometimes not express them in a way that he is better understood. Communication is at the heart of The Voyage Home, but not just for Spock. The plot of the film concerns a strange entity in space that looks like a combination of a small sphere and a gigantic cylinder. The mysterious being is threatening life on other planets, with Starfleet baffled about how to communicate with such a being. Studying the signal of the creature reveals that its language is akin to that of a whale. But with whales being extinct on Earth, the Enterprise crew is given the task of traveling back in time to 1980s Earth to bring back a whale. The Voyage Home is a fish-out-of-water story in that it finds the crew of the Enterprise trying to adapt to a different time, place, and people. While this was always a template for the explorative missions of the crew, the film is unique in that it inserts the characters into the present day when it was made. The audience is more attuned to the setting than the primary characters, and this leads to a lot of easy comedy. Scotty doesn't know how to operate the ancient tech of a computer mouse, and Chekhov learns just how difficult it is to procure nuclear energy in the 1980s. The film is also an ample opportunity to place the rest of the crew on equal footing for autism theory. Spock has always been considered the outsider and the more relatable autistic character for his literal interpretations and struggles with emotions. But now the rest of the crew feel that same frustration when interacting with the 20th century. One of Captain Kirk's first interactions in this era is with a motorist who nearly hits him in traffic.
Watch where you're going, you dumbass! Well, a double dumbass on you!
And it's the first big laugh to be had by the Enterprise crew stumbling about in the 1980s, and it's naturally a communicative bit. Star Trek has always been fascinating for how the Enterprise crew interacts with other cultures and tries to figure them out. The show often felt like you were right alongside the crew trying to figure out the customs and communications of every alien culture, from Klingons to Vulcans. Placing the entire crew in a world that the audience understands, but the crew does not, makes Kirk and company the outsiders not just to 1980s Earth, but for the viewer. Autism has sometimes been explained as the experience of being on an alien planet where you don't quite understand all the social rules or cultural habits. You struggle to communicate, and others often struggle to communicate with you as well. This is sometimes called the problem of double empathy, where individuals with different backgrounds and mindsets will struggle to empathize with each other. Spock, still struggling to understand humans in the future, has a harder time with customs of the 20th century as well. You might recall his notable dialogue of, "What does it mean, exact change?" He makes a big mistake during a reconnaissance mission at a zoo to find the appropriate whale that they need for their mission. Desiring to know more about the animal, Spock diverges from the tour group and proceeds to jump into the whale's tank to attempt a mind meld. While Spock does gain some valuable information, he frustrates Kirk and enrages Dr. Gillian Taylor. While Kirk is better able to adapt to the era when it comes to lying to Taylor for his mission, Spock does not favor being so secretive. Not as adept at the tact of reading people who are easily aggravated, Spock will often blurt out important and personal information at inappropriate times. Where this aspect of his character is more apparent is in the scene where Kirk, Spock, and Taylor converse in a car. As Kirk tries to calm the Doctor with some lies, Spock blurts out certain information asked of him, as though trying to prove to this woman that he is indeed a Vulcan. When she questions just how much these two strangers think they know about the whale Gracie, Spock just remarks, I know that Gracie is pregnant, a revelation that causes Taylor to comically slam on the brakes in her confusion. After some of Kirk's trademark wooing, he convinces Taylor to have dinner with them. She asks if they like Italian, and Kirk says yes, while Spock says no. Kirk tries to lead Spock on by stating that they do like Italian food, but Spock still doesn't relent. It's not until Kirk elaborates more on his sentence structure to communicate how the lie of this conversation is crucial to their mission, and that they will attain more information from Taylor if they play along.
No.
Yes. I love Italian. And so do you.
Yes.
What I love so much about this scene, aside from being a funny bit of back and forth, is that it showcases how Spock doesn't fully read social cues, but is not entirely oblivious to them either. He has known Kirk for quite some time and is able to pick up on some of his tactics and leading dialogue, even if not as promptly. There are plenty of other examples of Spock's autism coding beyond this movie, such as the episode The Naked Time from the original series and his contemplation of the song lyrics in the fifth movie. But I bring up The Voyage Home mostly because it's not just a great showcase of Spock's autistic coding, but places his fellow crew members in a similar state of struggling to interact with the world. It's also just a fun Star Trek movie in general that I absolutely adore. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies are perhaps the most unorthodox of Marvel superhero movies. The central characters are misfits of questionable moralities and various races in a space opera setting. They come together to defeat galactic threats, but only when it seems to benefit their motives on either an economic, personal, or traumatic level. The charisma is just off the charts for the characters assembled. Peter Quill has the classic fish-out-of-water comedy element as the only human among the group, cracking pop culture references only he and the audience understand. Gamora is the stepdaughter of the tyrant Thanos and is deeply torn about working for him and later breaking away from him. Rocket is a slick-talking raccoon bounty hunter teamed up with the walking, talking tree of Groot, his only discernible dialogue being, "I am Groot." But the one character that stuck out for the autistic community was that of Drax the Destroyer. He's an alien warrior who has lost his wife and child to war and seeks revenge. Such pathos would make him initially appear as a bland, revenge-driven anti-hero, but Drax proved to be a rather unique character. He's seen as perhaps the most direct of the Guardians, speaking openly without reading the room. Drax is blunt, less so out of matching the wry scathings akin to his comrades, and more out of making his thoughts more pronounced. Drax's brashness pairs well with the other Guardians who have personal stakes, but it's also his literal side that makes him interesting. When he first meets the other characters, he's briefly described as someone where everything goes over his head, but Drax responds with, "Nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast. I would catch it." It's a funny line, but it also tells us about Drax and sums up his personality well. He doesn't understand metaphors, will often be funny out of an unconscious innocence, and is very particular about how he is defined. For the autistic audience, this registered immediately. In Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Drax meets the character of Mantis, an empath alien that can read the feelings of others and even bring out calm. Anyone she touches, she can essentially read their minds by feeling all of their emotions, often sharing in them as well. This makes her a very appealing partner for somebody like Drax, who doesn't appreciate the more cryptic aspects of his friends who choose to hide their genuine emotions. This causes Drax to be elated when Mantis reveals that Peter has romantic feelings for Gamora, making Drax not only amused about Peter being so bashful, but eager for Mantis to read his mind as well. There's a very sweet moment later between Drax and Mantis where they talk much more openly about what they really feel. Though Drax doesn't hold back his opinion of Mantis's strange appearance, he does seem to try to comfort her in her sadness about being able to absorb the emotions of others. In a way, it's a skill that Drax admires, an ability to sense exactly what everyone else is feeling. It's something that he kind of struggles with. A great takeaway from this scene is that Drax imparts the knowledge that it's best to be honest with your emotions so that you can better come to terms with them. Further cementing the importance of this scene is that it leads to Mantis being more open about the evil plans of the manipulative ego, proving that talking openly about your emotions really can save the day. or the universe in this case. Now, what's interesting about Drax being autism coded is that he's a character in a huge blockbuster franchise that audiences resonate with. He was an enduring hero with some of the most quotable lines that could be so funny with such a direct delivery. The character would also appear in the major crossover films of Avengers Infinity War, where audiences still cared for him. They laughed at his adorable attempt to attain stealth through being motionless, and were saddened when he became an evaporated casualty of the universe being altered. And he was then met with cheers upon his inevitable return in Avengers Endgame during the grand revival of the fallen heroes. And even in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, he still has charm in his autism coding. Despite not knowing the language of some genetically modified children who have been imprisoned, Drax still tries to communicate, and he succeeds. It's a great scene that highlights that while there might be a communication disconnect between the autistic and the neurotypical, it's still worth trying to find a genuine connection. Drax has spent most of the movies incapable of reading between the lines and understanding others, but this third and final film allows him to be the only one capable of speaking an indecipherable language. So yeah, Drax is cool and autism coded.
Yes!
Ghost in the Shell takes place in a future where humanity has favored cybernetics. Technology has reshaped the world in every aspect, where every human on the planet has an online connection in their cybernetically enhanced brains. This development brings about concerns of security with how easy it is to not only hack into cybernetic body parts, but transfer consciousness as well. The film follows the cybersecurity force of Public Security Section 9 and its strongest member of Major Motoko Kusanagi. Motoko is more machine than woman, her body almost entirely composed of artificial and robotic parts. This aspect of Motoko finds her losing sight of what it means to be human, yet still struggling to hold on to it. When Motoko is on the job, she's cold, droll, and calculated. But she's also very thoughtful in how she has deep philosophical passages on what it means to be human and tries to maintain a level of individuality she feels that she might have lost. The fact that Motoko's body is artificial means that she could choose any form, but she chose that of a woman because that is how she views herself. This is abundantly clear in the first scene, where Motoko prepares a surprise assault using camouflage. Using this camouflaging technology, however, requires her to be naked, and we see her fully nude form in this moment. She has breasts, but they do not have areolas or pronounced nipples. She has a crotch, but no visible orifices in this area. This featureless body highlights how Motoko favors keeping up the appearance of a woman and not just acting as a sexless police robot. As many have noted with the movie, this position of Motoko's nude female body does have strong correlation to the topic of someone being transgender. It's a fairly common theme within a lot of sci-fi about transhumanism, but it's certainly more pronounced within Ghost in the Shell. That being said, some autistic coding can be found in Motoko. During her off hours, Kusanagi spends her leisure time scuba diving, an activity that isn't advisable for cyborgs with entirely artificial bodies. Her co-worker Bateau accompanies her on the boat and brings up this aspect about her body, that there's a high likelihood she could malfunction and wouldn't float to the surface. To Motoko, it's an adventure worth the risk for the sense of contentment it gives her. She speaks about how rising to the surface allows her to view her reflection in the water. Motoko has conformed to the world around her, but does not feel all that comfortable within it. This leads to her often getting lost in thought beyond her scuba dives. Several scenes showcase Motoko spacing out, and not just because she's internally hacking systems or pulling up data. She constantly thinks about what makes her human and how much of her identity remains when so much of her body has to be replaced. Motoko's target in the movie is the elusive hacker known as Puppet Master, jumping from body to body and avoiding capture. When Puppet Master is finally isolated to a damaged cybernetic body, Motoko and Section 9 learn that the Puppet Master does not have an original body. The entity was one born from the collective information of cyberspace and floats from body to body like a ghost. Puppet Master is a sentient being that has evolved in the digital age and aims to find a means of both safety and survival. The puppet master plans to secure his legacy in two ways. First, he seeks political asylum, realizing that his initial purpose and wanted status are a product of him being a political power tool by Section 6. He wants to be recognized as a person with the same rights as human beings, with both a body and a soul. Secondly, he asks a rather massive request of Motoko, a literal merging of the minds. His merging seems more out of a desire for procreation, realizing that his kind cannot evolve if merely copying his essence. He wants to have offspring that will also proceed down their own evolutionary road, thus ensuring entities like the Puppet Master will not only become more prolific, but develop into something more. This is a massive ask for Motoko Kusanagi, considering that both of them will no longer exist as two people, but one consciousness. Motoko and the Puppet Master share many similarities, making their merging a natural and cohesive bond. Both of them are racked with philosophical ponderings about their identity, questioning just how conscious they can be when bound by their technological limitations. After a closed conversation and the threat of execution by the government, Motoko allows the Puppet Master to merge with her mind and body. One could take a really nasty reading from this merging that relates to a biological imperative for those to feel whole only if they are endowed with the means of reproduction. Another reading, however, would be that Motoko and the Puppet Master can better understand each other when confessing to topics that are harder to discuss in a society that may not listen to them. The government does not truly care if Motoko feels uncomfortable with her body, or if the Puppet Master desires sanctuary and survival. To the state, they are merely products, more recognized for their tech than as individuals.
Autism destroys families. More importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are our children. And these are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. And we have to recognize we are doing this to our children.
It's only once they ditch the state and merge new forms of life and different methods of thinking and adapting to the cybernetic world that Motoko and the Puppet Master feel as though they are free. The topic of autism actually does come up in other iterations of Ghost in the Shell. In the reboot series, Standalone Complex, there's a medical diagnosis of closed shell syndrome. It's described as cyberbrain-induced autism, where those exceptionally adept to their cyberbrains will choose to basically close themselves off from the outside world, existing more in the digital landscape than reality. And I have some issues with this use of autism, considering it is also used to describe those who fear themselves lashing out at others for being unable to communicate with the world around them. But that's a topic for another video. In terms of the Ghost in the Shell movie, though, Motoko offers a solid framing of the cerebral struggles with autism. Problemista may be one of my favorite autistically coded films, not just for how it poses an autistic coded character, but also for how he interacts with a similarly neurodivergent coded character. The film follows the young immigrant Alejandro, played by the film's director and writer Julio Torres. Coming from El Salvador, Alejandro is trying to sell his toy ideas in New York City. His desired toys, however, are strange. He wants to create toy trucks that have tires that deflate and dolls with social media addiction. Alejandro's ideas are amusing for presenting a realism about the world that is not featured in toys aimed at children, finding the perfect balance of absurdity and honesty. While working at a cryogenic facility, yes, this film does get pretty weird, he befriends Elizabeth, played by Tilda Swinton. While Alejandro is more collected and straightforward with his ambitions, Elizabeth is a mess. While trying to organize an art show for her frozen husband, played by Riza, Elizabeth is frantic and furious, struggling to interact with the world. She often explodes at people and gets rather accusatory when she cannot understand the world around her. Alejandro works with Elizabeth to bring her art exhibit together despite her shortcomings. Although initially he takes on this job to ensure that he can stay in the country, a friendship develops between the two, where they connect on a level that they don't with anybody else. They essentially help each other out with both of their problems. About a quarter of the way into the movie, the coding struck me like lightning. While Alejandro is autism coded, Elizabeth is ADHD coded. There are so many aspects of her character that just scream ADHD, and how she handles her affairs and interacts with others. As for Alejandro's autism coding, it's how he speaks to people and views every situation as a puzzle to solve rather than stew in his dire situation. The film becomes more fascinating when viewed as a friendship between an autistic man and a woman with ADHD. They also help each other with their different quirks. Alejandro's patience and faithfulness help Elizabeth display and sell all of her husband's paintings. Elizabeth's spitfire nature inspires Alejandro to be more forceful in negotiating a toy contract. These two were made for each other, not destined to be lovers, but good friends who can see their potential. I should also mention that the film is just, it's weird. It's very weird, but in a good way. It's a film that involves bizarre toy ideas, cryogenic freezing, and a genie personifying Craigslist. It's a hilarious, quirky, and sweet film, even without the coding of characters being autistic or having ADHD, but having all that together just made me love this film so much more. Now, I could list many more examples of autistic coded characters, but this video would go on for hours, so let's just wrap it up. Autistic coding makes it easier for an autistic audience to connect with a medium and better communicate the experience to neurotypicals. It makes for a better representation than relying on stuff like The Good Doctor or The Unbreakable Boy. In this regard, autism coding is not only comforting, but necessary for filling in the blanks that the media so often neglects on this topic. Something that inspired me to make this video was a panel I did on autism at Anime Detour. I went over autistic traits within certain anime characters, and then opened it up to the floor to note other examples of autistic coding. And this was a packed room, and everybody had relatable aspects of autism that they wanted to mention in their favorite anime characters. After the panel, I had so many autistic anime fans come up to express their pleasure with the panel. Many of them were even inspired to host similar panels at other conventions. There was an air of ease in that room. People who were uncomfortable before were now open and eager to express themselves. That's why autism coding matters. It's not about armchair psychology or misinterpreting your favorite piece of media. It's about finding better representation when so little of it exists. Maybe one day we'll have a better representation that autism coding will not feel as frequent. But until that day, autism coding will have to suffice. Because if all we're getting is stuff like The Good Doctor on TV and The Unbreakable Boy in movies,
I am a surgeon!
then just fuck it. Drax is autistic now. That's right. I'm not even coding him. Like, he's ours now, neurotypicals. We're taking full custody. He's ours now. Okay, fine. You can have him every second Saturday of the month. We'll work out an arrangement.
Yes!
Hey folks, thanks for watching my video on autism coding in movies. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe for more video essays and movie reviews. And I'm sure there are many autistic coded characters I didn't cover, so feel free to cite more in the comments below. I'll see you next time. Go watch Problemista. I get the feeling most people weren't aware of that film. You know, compared to the other movies I mentioned, I'm sure a lot of people didn't hear about it. And if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. It's a really very fun film that I absolutely adore.